The F1 Academy. What is it? What are its goals? What does it hope to achieve? And how achievable is what it hopes to achieve? Today, I'm going to look into it. This is the FM. So, what is the F1 Academy? Well, the F1 Academy was put together, was introduced in 2023 with a pretty clear mission to get women into Formula One. It's as simple as that. It has been developed as a stepping stone, if you like, probably a stepping stone that women have never previously had to get into motorsport, certainly at the well, if you still want to call Formula One the pinnacle, then that's your call. But what used to be the pinnacle of motorsport, basically these chances just didn't exist. So the idea of the F1 Academy is to fast track that, is to help women along the way. Remember, the F1 Academy is not the intended destination. This is merely a stepping stone to get a woman onto the Formula One grid. So, what are the problems at the moment? Firstly, there's a talent pool problem. Now, I know how this is going to come across, and I have to be very delicate here. Oh, look, a man with a really bad mustache is telling women that they can't drive. No, 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 no. None of that. None of that. That's not the point. The big problem is, I would imagine, similar to a problem that football had not long ago. When I was a kid in the 90s, there wasn't much of a. Boys and girls were split. Boys played football at lunch breaks and whatever else at school, and the girls. Some of the girls I went to school with might not like me announcing this, but they used to dance to Spice Girls videos. If anybody of my similar age used to, well, not videos because we didn't have videos, but you get my point. And they used to create dance routines, and there was very much a split on the school playground back in the 90s. Boys did boy things, girls did girls things. Boys ran around eating worms and pretending sticks were guns, and girls didn't do that. There was very much a divide in the 90s, and as lads would develop into footballing careers or other sport careers, girls that may have been interested weren't given the pathways that they probably have now. You fast forward, obviously, the 30 years that we've had since the mid 90s, and it's different now. There is more soccer schools for girls. There is more girls getting into football. One of my very close friends, two of his two daughters both play football. So there is more of a, not only an acceptance within society, but there is more of a step for girls to get into football. Now we're probably still at that point in Formula One for young girls is probably still in the position where football was in the mid 90s. There isn't that female role model within Formula One, and obviously that's what F1 Academy sets out to try and prevent. But with a sport like Formula One, you have to start your development. We're talking at the age of 5, 6, maybe even earlier. If anybody saw McLaren's Instagram post just after Lando Norris won the World Championship last year, there was quite a heartfelt video showing obviously all the karting things that his mum and dad had taken him to at an early age, etc., etc. And effectively, the bottom line is, this is the age you have to get into most sports, I would argue, to be competitive and to make it professionally these days. But certainly in Formula One, it has to be something that you almost have to be born into a go-kart. And lads can traditionally look to the heroes, the Lewis Hamiltons, the Max Verstappens, the Lando Norrises, even for this one's for Phil, the George Russells, and there isn't that female role model. That is exactly what Susie Wolff intends to be, and that is exactly what she wants F1 Academy to be. But as it stands right now, there isn't that. That isn't there. So that is a sticking point, because I would imagine, I don't know the numbers, I don't know if there are numbers, but I can't imagine that there are many 4, 5, 6-year-old girls who dream to be the next or the first female Lewis Hamilton. I would imagine that there's a lot more young boys who are interested by go-karts and therefore step the progression. So that's one big problem. The talent pool just isn't there. And this isn't me being derogatory towards women drivers, but far from it. The point being is they are just not, there isn't that talent pool. They're not starting at 4, 5, 6 years old like the men are and like the men have to. That is a significant problem. And F1 Academy hopes to eradicate that problem, but that's going to take time. That isn't going to be fixed overnight. So that's problem number one. Problem number two. Yes, money. Now, I'm not saying women are poor, but again, far from it. You have to make sure that you're not just judging all of this as me being a bigoted, sexist man sat there with his mustache. The idea that what I'm getting at here is that there needs to be sponsorship. And again, it goes back to that talent pool. You look at, there are certain drivers within Formula One who have got there based on the merit of their parents. It is well documented that Lando Norris's father, Adam, had to fund a lot of Lando's step towards Formula One. That funding comes back if they make it famous. Of course it does, and popular and successful. Adam Norris will never look back at any of his decisions with any regret. Look again at Lance Stroll. Lawrence Stroll probably has a number of regrets, but he has a lot of money and he probably doesn't care. But they're able to fund it in this way. And for those that don't necessarily have that money from a family background, you do have, obviously, as we've mentioned before, the sponsorship rights, your Franco Colapintos of this world, who are heavily funded by Argentinian businesses, and that is what's helped them progress through the steps. McLaren famously have funded and assisted the funding of both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri's steps through to Formula One. These aren't bad things. It's just that because the lads are starting earlier, their talent is noticed much quicker and they're getting the sponsorship. Sergio Perez is famously sponsored heavily by is it Telcel from Mexico? Obviously, Kit Kat are a massive sponsor of his as well. But this all comes from being a Mexican driver in Formula One, that of which there isn't many. So funding is a big problem. And again, if there's no girls being spotted at an early age that are capable of bringing that talent forward, they're going to lack in the sponsorship. That means that all the financial backing has to come from a central point. And again, go back to point one. If there isn't many women at the age of 4 or 5 who are desperately interested in a career in motorsport, then that funding, I can't imagine many parents are going to want to fund the millions and millions of dollars that you have to fund a Formula One career based on waking up one day and quite fancying giving it a crack. So the two problems there, problem 1 and 2, are interlinked a little bit, and that funding needs to come from somewhere, and that funding needs to come from exposure, and that's what the F1 Academy is setting out to do. Get that exposure to young girls who might be interested in a career in motorsport, and get that exposure to any potential sponsorships, any potential funding support, anything that they may need. But again, we're talking about a pathway that was developed, that was brought into play in 2023. This isn't going to be something that we're going to see fixed overnight. But there are your first two problems with what's going on with Formula One Academy and why it's not yet achieved what it hopes to do. Problem number 3. Now, this is a big problem, and we already know that there's a huge step up from F3 to F2, and then obviously continually from F2 to F1. That step is increased even further when you look down to the F1 Academy. I'm just going to show a stat now, an image on the screen now, which will really back up the point I'm trying to make. So as you can see, F1 cars produce around 1,000 horsepower. That's obviously thanks to the hybrid engines, the 50-50 battery that we're talking about at the moment. F2 cars sit roughly at about 620. With very similar acceleration to F1 off the line. F3 cars drop down to about 380 horsepower. Now you can see there from the F1 Academy cars, they're basically F4 level machines. So it's around 170 brake horsepower. That's widely accepted at spec level. 0 to 60 ratio for F1 is about 2.5 seconds. For F2, about 2.8 seconds. And you can see there what it is for F3 and F1 Academy too. So there's obviously speed, power-wise, there is a massive step up. The big difference, and this is a real difference, and this is something that really surprised me when I saw the G-force is the biggest shock. The F1 drivers will generally face around 5 to 6 Gs in corners. For F1 Academy, it is down to 2 Gs. It is basically triple the physical load on your neck and body. Now, I am not for 1 second saying, again, you have to make sure that you're not taking me wrong on this. I'm not for 1 second saying that women can't do what men can do. Please, please, please don't take that as any what this video is about. I'm just trying to highlight the differences. 3 times the physical torque. What we are expecting lads to do when they're stepping up through these stages, we're expecting them to get their bodies ready for this sort of physical torment, the 5 to 6 G through corners that they will have to face every weekend on a race, multiple times around a track. And the F1 Academy are having to do 1/3 of that level of physical toll upon their bodies. That will have to change. The F1 Academy cars will have to eventually get more powerful, etc., because the gap, it's not just faster Formula One is not just faster than Formula One Academy. It's almost a completely different sport. You are almost trying to prepare these women for a future in Formula One by putting them in level go-karts that the Formula Silverstone experiences that you can get. This there's such a massive step up. It's not just a ladder between F1 Academy and Formula One. This is an absolute cataclysmic, thing to try and climb out of. And if you imagine that every rung of the ladder, there's about 3 rungs missing, and every time it's such a significant leap. One thing that F1 Academy has to do for me is they have to find a way slowly, I admit, and it can't be done overnight, but slowly, to increase the power, to increase the torque, to increase and get these cars that the girls are driving, to get them closer to the level that the Formula One cars are at. Because that gap from, as you can see on the graphic, that gap from F1 Academy to Formula 3 even is such a huge gap, and then the gap from F3 to F2 is such a huge gap, and then the gap from F2 to Formula 1 is such a massive gap. We've seen so many drivers come from Formula 2, be really successful in Formula 2, step up into Formula 1, and they can't necessarily do it. We've had one world champion who is an academy graduate from Formula 2, that Lando Norris in 2025. That shows the difference between F2 and F1. You've then got to put that a couple more steps down, further down the rank, down to F1 Academy. And it's not just linear, it's exponential, this difference. It's, like I say, it isn't a case of just a difference of 200 horsepower or a second. It's ridiculous, the gaps. And this is just an indication of what we're looking at here. An average sort of lap time, if you like, for a track like, let's say, Silverstone, easily the best circuit on the calendar, let's be honest. So a Formula One car will look to do that in around a 1:27, something like that. Anything quicker than that would be quite considerably decent. So that's where you're looking, about a 1:27. F2 are looking at about a 1:40. F3 about looking like a 1:45 plus. Now F1 Academy are looking anywhere between a 1:55 and a 2-minute mark. So that is about 30 seconds slower. Now, again, in a lot of times, 30 seconds isn't seen as much of a difference. But when you're talking about a sport like Formula One, 30 seconds is magnificently different. And that's the difference we're at. That gap needs to be bridged. Yes, the gap between F3 and F1 Academy is only 10 seconds, and you can see from the timings that it is a gradual step. But there's just so much. This is, like I say, we're talking at the moment about F1 Academy and Formula One being two completely different sports. That gap needs to get closer by those in charge, bring those two cars and the two sort of strains and what the sports are closer together, and then we might start to see that gap being bridged a little bit more. So, is it all doom and gloom? No, it isn't. And let's be honest, it isn't all doom and gloom. What we've got now with the Formula One Academy is we have something where at least we are making an effort. We had the W Series not too long ago, but I think the branding to the W Series, at the risk of sounding disrespectful to it, I think attaching the name W Series to it and really making it sound like it wasn't a part of Formula One probably wasn't the best branding way to go. Now with the F1 Academy, having that F1, that logo, that branding, that marketing, having the races at the same weekends as the Formula One weekends, all that sort of stuff, it is encouraging. We are getting people are being now made aware of it, as we did with women's football in the UK, at least, so many years ago, and now we are starting to bear the fruits from it. Formula One is the next sport that needs to do the same thing. Two things that, for me, that I think would be really beneficial. I think it's important that they have the races the same weekend as the Formula One weekend, but I think only having 6 races, again 6 this season because of what's going on in Iran, but what should have only been 8 races in an F1 calendar where we have 24 races, it's not enough coverage for me. I also think maybe it doesn't always have to follow the Formula One calendar. I know I may sound a little bit contradictory with what I just said there about how it's important that it does, and it is important that it does, but maybe not necessarily all the time. Why can't the F1 Academy look at this at the moment? We've got a perfect opportunity where we have no Formula One. This would be a really good opportunity to get fans like myself who maybe looking to scratch an itch that they're missing from the Formula One to turn us on to something different. But what we've actually got is a gap until the 22nd of May before the F1 Academy will be back in Canada, again, as part of the Formula One weekend. Yes, all right, it's a little bit too much to ask them to react to what's going on in the Middle East and put 2 Grand Prix on, but you get my point. When we have a break in Formula One, is it not a terrible idea to have an F1 Academy race somewhere else? We have so many circuits. We have so many circuits that are no longer part of the Formula One calendar. Why can't we go to these places? Why don't we have an F1 Academy race across more of Europe? I think from memory, it's only Silverstone that's the European Grand Prix. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but there is only the Silverstone, and this year is Silverstone's debut of the F1 Academy. The F1, I think F1 needs to do more to support it. I think it needs to give it more exposure on race weekends, and I think it needs to give it more of its own exposure. How can you really have a competitive season that's based over 8 races that's now cut down to 6? It needs more. As I said, I think it also needs to bridge that gap a little bit closer. The cars need to be a little bit closer to what we've got. Why not take a step and put them into F3 cars? Eventually, the idea is that they will take that step. Is it not possible to have F3 and F1 Academy side by side, and both of them as a feeder point into F2, which will of course eventually become a feeder point into Formula One? At the moment, I think the distances between what we've got is, and I don't mean this to sound like it will, but the lads side of racing, i.e. F1, F2, F3, because there has been no women in those, certainly in the last 50 years. So why can't we have F3 and F1 Academy side by side? Exactly the same engines, exactly the same cars, exactly the same race calendar, and have those two both as a feeder point into F2. That could almost be your indirect men versus women. And I don't mean that to start all sorts of civil war. What I mean is, let's see how these two levels of, let's see how the lads get on against the girls. Let's see how in the same machinery, how competitive the girls are. Because the bottom line is, that gap needs to be bridged. At the moment, there is a huge gap, and it is down to so many factors. You know, we've only ever had one female in Formula One, and that was back in the 1970s, who actually competed in any races. There is generations of lads who were brought up into motorsport. There are generations who have followed in their dad's footsteps, or blah blah blah. There's generations of Lance Strolls who've been funded when they have absolutely zero talent. There could very well be women in the Formula One Academy that are better than your Lance Strolls of this world. In fact, I have absolutely no doubt that they're better than Lance Strolls. Maybe that's not considered a compliment, but I mean it. Maybe we have no, at the moment, we have no metrics of measure. There could be women in the F1 Academy that are far superior to some of the lads down in F3 and F2. We don't know that there isn't, because the natures are just not close enough. Get those F1 Academy cars up to the level of Formula 3, and let's have them not necessarily racing against each other, at least for a while. Let's get them side by side and see, just timings wise, see who can perform better in the similar machinery. And then those who perform better take that step into F2, whether they are male or female. It should have no bearing. Formula One is fortunate in as much as it's not one of those sports where, football, for instance, you'll never get to a point in football where men and women are playing alongside one another on the pitch. It's just, you'll never see such a physical sport be contested intersexually like that. However, Formula One, there's no real reason why that can't be the case. It's not a physical sport in as much as physical content. Of course, it is a physical sport with regards to the strains that you get from the G-force, but there is nothing other than, other than the points I've mentioned earlier, there is nothing preventing women getting into Formula One. Do I see this as something that will be fixed in the next 2 to 5 years? Absolutely not. It's too much to do. However, Susie Wolff has started something fantastic in 2023, and we are making the steps that we need to make. We're a long way off it. Let's not beat around the bush. We are a long way off getting women into Formula One. But realistically, in the next 10 to 15 years, is this a realistic target? I absolutely don't see why not. I think you need to increase exposure, which will therefore, in the long term, the more young girls are seeing Formula One Academy at the race circuits they're going to, on the TV at the same weekend as the Formula One, on the TV itself separately away from the Formula One. Let's get that exposure out there. Let's get young girls interested into a career in Formula and in other realms of motorsport. Let's get to that point. Then we can start to, and again, once they get there, let's get these cars closer together. Let's get these cars closer to the ones that they hope and dream to drive one day, because the gaps are just too big at the moment. This will all take time. This will not be something that will be fixed overnight, and it needs to be gradual steps. Do I think it will work one day? Time will tell. Do I hope it will work one day? Absolutely. There is absolutely no reason for me why we can't see this. And all power to the girls if they want to get into the sport. I know that might sound a little bit patronizing, but look, I'm all for it. I don't see any reason why not. I think it would be a real positive thing for Formula One to do this. And I don't think that this is just a PR step. I don't think that this is just a that message of trying to advertise equality. It will only come to fruition if we start to make the changes, in my opinion, that I've highlighted in this video. Anyway, so that is it. May have rambled a little bit. Let me know what you think. Do you think Formula One Academy is going to achieve what it sets out to achieve? Do you think the gaps are too big? Do you think that we will see a woman in Formula One in the next sort of 10 to 15 years? Let me know in the comments. Drop us a like, a comment, and a subscribe. And thank you for tuning in. And we will be back next week when either me or Phil or someone does a video on something. We haven't thought about it, but never mind. We'll see you next week.